Good afternoon, and thank you everyone so much for joining us. Whether you've been participating in this event all day or this is your first session, we are really glad that you're here. Before we get started, we wanted to find out who we have in our audience, who it consists of. We anticipate that there are a lot of law school administrators with us today, and probably some employers. But if you're with any reporting agencies like NELP or the ABA, US News, Law School Transparency, or similar, or if you're with the media, could you please identify yourselves in the chat section? While we give people a chance to identify themselves if appropriate, I'm going to go ahead and continue. I know that for me, when I joined the profession of law school career advising, it was a lot less daunting because there was a resource like NELP that had basically best practices and programming ideas for nearly every scenario that a CSO can possibly encounter. That is, unless something unprecedented happened, like COVID. There simply are not any best practices established for a global pandemic at this time. We do feel, however, that the actions that we're all taking right now and the discussions that we're having today are really going to, they promise to shape sort of the best practices for the future. And so again, we are really glad to have so many fantastic participants and look forward to working with you today. I wanted to go over the structure of our panel a little bit. In just a few moments, we're going to split into 3 randomly assigned breakout sessions. Each session will be led with one of our co-panelists, and they will lead with some guided discussion that questions and topics that we've come up with in advance. And each group will assign a recorder. Once we come back together after about 15 minutes of discussion as a large group, each one of the recorders will offer a report to our large group on what their session discussed, and we'll go from there. Right now, I'd love to make sure my co-panelists have an opportunity to introduce themselves. I'll get us started. I'm Heather Spielmaker. I'm the Assistant Dean for Career Services at KU Law in Kansas. Previously, I was leading the career office at WVU Law in Morgantown, West Virginia. And before that, I was Director of Professionalism and Pro Bono Programming at WMU Cooley. I am a graduate of Michigan State University and WMU Cooley, and I'm really glad to be here today. Michelle, did you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure, Heather, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. This is really exciting to see so many people. Most of you who I see by name, I know, and many of you know me from our NALP life, right? But I'm Michelle Jackson. I am the Director of Alumni Advising in the Career Center at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. So in that role, I advise alumni. So I'm the career counselor for alumni the same way we all are for students. So that's a lot of fun, a lot of variety, as you can imagine. And I also counsel students as well. So I'm a member of the career strategy team at the Law Center at Northwestern. Arturo?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for making it. Super thrilled to have you here. My name is Arturo Thompson. I am the Assistant Dean for the Career Development Office at the S.J. Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah. Prior to that, I was the Assistant Dean at the University of Kansas, where my great colleague Heather is now. Prior to that, I practiced as an attorney. I'm a graduate of the KU Law School. Practiced as an attorney, and then before that, I was in Marcom for over a decade before I became a lawyer and now a recovering lawyer. So that's my story.
All right, then without further ado, we will be placed randomly into our breakout groups. I know some of you have had some trouble being placed in breakout groups at previous sessions. We have a backup plan lined up for that. You will probably by default be with me, but I will see everyone back in about 15 minutes after discussion. Okay, well, our group goes first talking about OCIs. Our recorder was Jacqueline Howell, and so she is going to give a report on what we discussed.
Hi, everyone. So we discussed a few ideas regarding fall OCI or spring recruiting, kind of getting an idea of what most schools were doing. A lot of schools are going to be moving their fall recruiting to the winter or early spring semesters. The University of Massachusetts will actually be hosting a fall OCI, but those OCIs will be held virtually. Many schools will be doing a larger spring OCI that will for many, be held virtually as well. There were some questions about resume collections and whether they would be offered in the fall. Several individuals indicated that they will offer fall OCI. There was a concern there as to whether or not there will be students who are being recruited ahead of time that that we wanted to allow the employers an equal playing field. But in most cases, the school said that they would allow employers to do a resume collection in the fall upon request, but will encourage employers to participate in spring OCI. Also, we discussed how schools are engaging employers during the fall in light of the absence of fall recruiting or official OCI. One of the schools mentioned that they will be doing a Tuesday lunch hour where they will be highlighting employers, which is a great idea, a fantastic way to continue to reach out to those employers that typically would participate in the fall, maybe will be hiring in the fall. And this is similar to something that other schools are doing as well, trying to find ways to highlight employers and to allow students to network with those employers prior to on-campus recruiting. Did I miss anything, Heather?
No, I felt like that was a great summary. Like the other groups, we wish we'd had more time. Michelle, did you want to invite your recorder to give us a report?
Sure. Before we do that, our session had a couple of questions about OCI. Does anyone want to ask those questions while we're all in a group for a minute or a minute and a half? Neil?
Looks like Neil Dennis has something to share.
Neil Dennis has something to share. I think my mind has kept coming back again and again, just because New York is our main market to pre-recruiting. It just worries me. I've already gotten a resume collect job posting from one, but it's just one, and I'm like, are you? I wrote them back. I was like, are you serious about this, or is this some kind of automatic thing? Because if I do this, you're going to hear from everyone, and everyone's going to hear from everyone, and my students are going to be jumping on this immediately. I've been trying to temper that right now, but again, I don't know, what extent, if anyone else has heard about the pre-recruiting market at all.
So I had a firm that reached out to me because they were afraid that another firm would do it because they've done it in other contexts, going after 1Ls. And in that case, some pretty specialized 1Ls that are kind of the holy grail unicorns when we get them. And it came up this time, and lo and behold, that firm showed up. We're about to send out a letter to employers that Jacqueline Howell, who just reported, she and I work together, we're colleagues. Jacqueline and I have drafted, and a part of that says that, we always encourage our students to stay with their commitments. Understand that if you come in the fall, because OCI for us will be in the spring, you may find that someone participates in the spring, because I'm not going to bar them and I can't, gets a better offer and walks, and suddenly you're out in the cold because you're going to be 4 weeks behind anyone else recruiting. So to take real care, if you want to show up in the fall, I will be there to support you, absolutely, but understand there's an immense risk, and you got to expect that some students are going to take advantage of that, or because they're going to feel like, well, I've got to say yes because I'm so freaked out, and then it turns out they get their first semester grades or maybe their third semester grades, and they're like, oh my God, I've got these other opportunities. I'm going to walk. I'm not, I'm going to talk to them about it, but I'm not going to hold their feet to the fire with the same amount of sort of dour look that I would in a normal year.
Dour look. We did have a great question here, and this was one of the topics that I had planned for us if we had had more time. about, in light of the active efforts for anti-racism, are there any OCI ideas for helping to advance diversity efforts? I would love to have a broader discussion about that when we have our part 2. But is that something that anyone wants to make some comments about right now while we're together?
Well, I know we should, in whatever market we're in, we should think about using our leverage in that market to kind of move the needle. So, for Northwestern, Chicago market, we're T14, whatever. So, but you can say to employers, we want you to have, are you Mansfield certified? Or are you participating in, these particular initiatives? So use, whatever your market position is in your market to kind of urge and nudge the firms a little bit to, participate in some of the initiatives, or, let what initiatives they are, implementing with regard to anti-racism and equity in general. So that's one idea that, other people have been kind of tossing around. It's like, how can schools use whatever leverage we have in our particular markets to have the employers who want to engage our students, do the right thing with regard to equity.
Are you having the employers identify themselves with those certifications, like on their job postings in Simplicity or 1220?
We haven't implemented to that level yet, but that is our discussion right now. We're trying to figure out the most, the best way to get that done without, alienating anyone. So, it's a tough, we all know, it's kind of a tough nut to crack, but that is the plan. We're talking about the best way to do that. And so, yes, so having it be part of the employer questionnaire when they sign up for, whatever program it is, have them have to check a box. So that's what we're discussing. So
I wonder if Simplicity and 1220 are having those discussions about whether or not they should make some changes to their forms for when employers register. That would be really nice.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. So on programming then, Neil, you are our reporter. So thank you, Heather. You are a reporter for our programming discussion. So please go ahead.
I did you wrong, Michelle. I took no notes whatsoever. I don't know what's going on. No, I was joking. So we had a really great discussion. The first topic that we talked about was our students' anger and stress and angst that they're going through right now, and whether we've had any programming around that. A lot of our the people in our room had a lot of town halls, basically either at their office level or at the dean's level. Some of them weekly. One of them was really just to focused on students that are about to take the bar, and the angst that goes into that, where one of the states represented in our room is having their in-person exam in July, and students were rightfully scared and worried about that. So they needed to have some sort of venue to talk about it, and the school provided that. We also talked for a minute about, and this was my question, about students that were demanding more than what we could offer. So, telling us to lobby Congress or do something of that nature to get things changed. And, I think Elizabeth, you had mentioned that there's only so much that we can do, and we had to acknowledge what was in our control and what was not. I thought that was a really great way to put it. And that's a really great thing that we can tell our students, is that, look, you're in control of studying for the bar and passing it and doing well. Emphasize that, you can write your letters, which they have, and which my students have as well. But not much changes come from that. So now it's time to buckle down and do this thing and pass. We also talked about what we're doing to prepare our 2Ls, what kind of program we're having around OCIs, for instance, since some things have been pushed into the spring. What are we doing now in the fall? And again, Duke had some really interesting, some really great programming. They set up coffee chats, I guess virtual coffee chats between alumni and students, as well as employee spotlights, which was also great. I should mention before, just in terms of the angst and anger, one of our other schools has set up a really great program with their alumni who graduated during turbulent times, like those that graduated in 2010 and 2011, and paired them up with the students who have graduated now or who are going to be graduating, to kind of give them an experienced shoulder to not cry on, but to lean on, let's say, and let them know that things will turn out okay in the end, even though it looks really hard right now. Going back to preparing our 2Ls, there was Duke also had a really interesting employer spotlight event that they put on for about an hour. Before attorneys talking about their careers and talking about their firms. You'd have about 20 students in those rooms. They've been going really well. I myself had mentioned that we have taken our programming calendar and basically found ways to distill them into smaller, bite-sized videos. Our school invested a lot in video equipment and editors, so we are creating sort of a video series for our students that they can access and kind of learn from. And then what we'll do is follow up with Q&As via Zoom, which brings us to the final topic, which is Zoom fatigue. For both us and our students, as a matter of fact, just because they're going to have a whole lot of Zoom in their lives. One of our folks had mentioned there's going to be competing Zoom meetings that they're going to need to go to, and it's just going to be Zoom all the time. There's a really great comment about setting up outside meetings. One of our people mentioned that they're setting up an outside meeting with students. Folks had said that they're trying to get in front of students earlier than orientation because they're not going to remember us during orientation. So they're able to, find a chunk of time for incoming students to meet with them outside of orientation or before orientation starts. So again, just a way to get to them before the Zoomification kicks in. And I think that's where we ended off. If I'm missing anything, Michelle or anyone else in our room, let me know.
No, I think that those are the notes I had too, Neil. Thank you. And so programming is interesting as we tackle that topic and trying to figure out what's going to work. And Neil's idea of these bite-sized videos was really kind of interesting, and also the employer spotlight, like from Duke, that was something that we were like, So thank you all for sharing those. So Arturo, culture.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Will our recorder please sort of indicate who you are? I failed to write down your name. Okay, I thought it was Megan, but I wasn't sure because suddenly I have a sea of 100 people, 114, which is very exciting. Megan, may I hand the floor over to you?
Sure, and I will do my best, but about, I would say 2/3 of the way through, my power flickered off, so I lost the end of our conversation. We'll
chime in.
I'll do my notes up till the point that I lost it. There is some duplication, I think, in some of the things that we discussed and some of the things Neil was just talking about. We talked about creating culture and our concern about 1Ls specifically for how they were going to feel connected to both us and to the school and to the practice generally. So one idea from Case Western, from Mary Beth Moore, was to be getting video testimonials from 2Ls and 3Ls, maybe in the form of a recorded dialogue between a student and a career counselor, just talking through, and have that recorded and made available to the students. That was echoed at least by one other school. Elizabeth from the University of South Carolina had a great idea for how we need to be more intentional about sharing personal details about ourselves to create personal connections, whereas normally a student might see something in our office that catches their eye, a photo of our family or our dog or our kids, and how we're going to need to be sharing more actively details. Maybe we probably need to be selective about those things that we share, obviously, but how that could create a natural affinity between students and give us talking points that aren't just purely professional. Arturo mentioned these jumpstart meetings that his crew does, which sounds similar to some of the things that Neil was talking about, but in the past it would have been a dynamic between a couple alumni that are particularly personable and about 5 students with Arturo as a mediator, maybe at a bar or a restaurant, and how now, luckily Arturo has a budget for food. At Pitt Law, we do not, but that he can do takeout, and everyone orders off the same menu, so there is still that affinity. Our bar association did something like that recently, where everyone got a pizza coupon, and then they could have, the free food aspect is still there, and you have about a 2-hour conversation in a small group. And then trying to think. This is right around when everything went bad for me. So we were talking about attendance, how to make sure that if we try to host some of these things virtually with the Zoom fatigue and with lack of accountability, how do we increase accountability for people if we're going to go through the motions of creating these programs? And one of the last things that I heard had to do with just not putting an alumni on the spot to have something that no one attended, but to pre-record it, make it available, and then have that alumni say, I'll be available for calls or follow-ups from students who watch this. And that way they're not feeling kind of bad about putting on a program when no one is there. But also from Duke, having people pre-register via Qualtrics survey or other types of forms, just to increase some registration accountability. And Arturo can take it from there. Thanks.
Yeah, actually, I think that was really comprehensive. The one thing I'll add to the RSVP thing, I'm an immense fan of what I call the velvet rope. So even if I could have like 40 people at an event, I might limit it. Sorry, that's me. What that is. But I might limit it to only like 20 people. And I advertise the fact that it's limited to only 20 people. And this sense of scarcity, it creates competition. Which is how I sold Wichita. That's a long story I'm not going to share. But it's how I create competition. And then the people who show up really do want to be there. And the people who don't get to come will definitely sign up early for the next event. So anyways, just a related topic. But there were some other things we covered. Would other people please chime in from our group? Anyone? Or we have the extended awkward silence, which I'm actually good with because I'm kind of awkward anyway, as Tammy King knows, because we were colleagues at neighboring schools. So going back to sort of the big, Heather and Michelle, going back to our big topics that were raised, are there any additional topics people want to talk about or that they want to drill down on? We're actually fortunate. We have, we're doing really well on time. I think we've got 15 minutes.
I think aside from the how do we encourage diversity and that conversation that we already identified, I'd love to have a little more discussion about what schools are planning to do to kind of fill the gap. I think we're all anticipating that the market might be, there might be a dip in the employment market next year. There might be fewer people in spring than we would have had collectively in fall and spring for on-campus interviews. And what are some of our colleagues doing to sort of fill that gap and to, find other programs to assist job seekers if it's not gonna, if we're not gonna get the kind of yield that we're used to getting from OCIs.
You know what, Drake, we really beefed up our website this last year. It was pre-COVID, but our timing couldn't have been better. We used to literally have a sheet that had websites on it. That was our online resource. And now they're actually online. So things like that really helped our timing. And I think we're going to have to use a lot of that because I am nervous about all the emphasis that's being put on winter OCIs. And we have no idea how many people are going to take part in that. We just don't know. So I think any more that we can put those resources at their fingertips on their own timetable will help.
Heather, this doesn't directly answer your question, but one of the things that I'm starting to see is increased interest amongst my students in government and public interest positions. And I think, boy, this summer has been such a reckoning, right? And so, maybe some students who came in thinking public interest and had stepped away from that are going back to it. But again, it doesn't address the sort of what happens with the broader employment market. But I think it'll be interesting to see whether we see an uptick in those positions. And we've certainly had some government employers reach out and indicate that they're still planning to move forward with hiring. So that's also encouraging.
Yeah, that was, oh, go ahead, somebody else.
Well, I was just going to say this, Arturo. I'm hearing the same thing that Elizabeth is hearing, that a bit of an uptick in government. I also think, those JD Advantage jobs are going to be really important. And one of the things that I do I spent a lot of time at my last institution talking with my faculty about, and pretty pointedly, frankly, in faculty meetings, and I don't know Utah well enough, but I think it's always a part of faculty. It's always an issue potentially with faculty, is making sure that JDA jobs are not denigrated, right? Like that's an amazing outcome if it's the right outcome for you. Small firms are not denigrated. Those are amazing opportunities. Rural opportunities are not denigrated, right? And it's easy to do because it's easy to punt on those. I genuinely think they're fantastic opportunities, but you know, for students, a lot of them are pretty high self-monitors. They're looking for approval, and they're already under a lot of stress. And so if it's not a big firm or whatever is designated as the best outcome, that's problematic. The other thing here at Utah that I've been really impressed with is the Judicial Clerkship Committee believes that there's a clerkship for everyone. So yeah, there's the federal and there's the state Supreme Court and the state Court of Appeals, but they also do active placement and courting of judges at the state district court level, which is really open to anyone in our class, you know, almost within any sort of academic bounds. And I think those are amazing opportunities that are likely to still be here in some fashion in a year or 2 or 3 years, even if other things are getting soft.
Leslie, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just, hi everyone. I should start there. It's nice to see all of you. I just wanted to mention what our experience so far has been with our August OCI. Now, it's not a big firm oriented OCI. It's small firms, it's regional players, it's regional offices of governments, branches, but it's also, it's not limited to that. It's not limited to our location because so much is remote now. And I have to tell you, we had a surprising interest in employers to participate in our OCI program. We weren't sure if we were going to have really any interest, if people were hiring, if people were looking for interns for this next summer or this fall. It's a very broad OCI. It's for recent graduates. It's for the coming academic year. It's for the following summer. We do we cast a really broad net, and honestly, we have much more interest than we anticipated. And Heather, I had started this program. I know you had done something in August to capture a different kind of market a couple of years back, and it inspired me to do something in August. And last year was our first year, and this is our second year. And I was like, I didn't want to not do it because I thought we were finally getting momentum to keep a regularized program in August. And I have to tell you, I'm really glad we didn't step away from it. So if people are thinking about doing that or toying with it, we're offering resume collect and interviews that we'll do virtually on some platform. But I think people should just not discount the interest that might be there that's outside of big law.
Leslie, the question came up in the chat. Did you guys do pass fail in the spring?
Yes.
Okay.
But again, my school is very not big firm oriented. And so that's not as much of an issue for us as it is for other institutions. So.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I see, Megan, you have your hand up.
Hi, I'm Megan Zerbruggen. I'm from the University of Wisconsin Law. I just wanted to build off of what Elizabeth Beal had shared regarding seeing some students maybe lean more towards the public interest side of things. I actually coordinate our pro bono program through our career services office as well. And one of the things we got creative with this summer, let me see if I can share my, okay, hello. One of the things that we got creative with when everyone kind of had to take a sharp left turn was this summer, I reached out to our community and nonprofit studies, which is actually one of our undergrad programs, and worked with that organization and found a number of organizations that were looking for some sort of pro bono legal help. And so that became not only a bridge and a nice connection for future pro bono opportunities, but it also filled a huge gap for some of our students, many of whom were left with their summer experience being pulled under them. So one tip that we have was really to maybe utilize some of those undergrad department connections that might lead to some extra experiences.
That's great. And on the public interest side, many of you know Katie Shelton, she's here at Northwestern. She mentioned to us that she feels, at least for this coming graduating class, that the public interest employers and nonprofits have their funding in place already. So that's something that's probably going to be okay, at least this coming year. We don't, obviously none of us know what's going to happen in the future, but she said she feels pretty confident that for the 2021 class, the funding for many of those jobs is already in place. So that's another reason why, students are maybe looking at that option. So, that was something that she shared with us. And in the chat, it's mentioned that many of the local legal aids got the CARES Act funding too, so there's extra positions there. So yeah, it's looking, maybe public interest, looks a little bit brighter for immediate prospects than the private sector. One of the other things that we heard from students over the summer, and I want to see if other people had the same kind of feedback, was, we had different town halls and meetings and brought in outside people to talk, and the students seem to feel that, this kind of where the market is going, don't worry, your career is going to be fine, we'll all get through this type of language is a little bit disingenuous, and that they want to know, okay, what's happening in the next 18 months? Like what's happening to me, within the next year, 18 months, and so it's this need for transparency that we don't have the answers to either, but I think the transparency in that we know we don't have the answers, but we're trying to get them for you. So I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but they, we had speakers talk about, hey, we'll get through this. We got through, every other one, but the students were like, yeah, we're not really feeling that. We want to know what's going to happen, sooner. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that.
That's been really hard for me too. You get students who want to hear the real deal. Maybe they want reassurance. Maybe they just want to hear the real deal. The problem with it being unprecedented is not one of us can accurately predict exactly what's going to happen 6 months from now to the legal employment market. So anyone's guess is as good as the next. And that's really hard because we're used to, we're experienced professionals. We're used to having the answers to all these questions. And for me, it makes me feel very unsettled to not have great answers for my students.
My approach to that, and it comes from my time in advertising, is expectation setting is everything. So I'm brutally honest with my students. I also tell them that the entire, every resource the school has is behind you. And it literally is the case, right? And we try and demonstrate that. But if it's going to suck, it's going to suck, and we're going to be totally behind you, and we're going to kill it, but it's going to be a heavy lift, right? Or maybe it turns out not to be that bad. We don't know. But yeah, I think part of the problem with the Pollyannish message is, even for the people who are willing to buy it now, they're going to be really, really angry at us later if it doesn't pay out.
One of the things that I found really helpful, and this is certainly a testament to the community here, is, I know a lot of you, because I've seen your faces on all the NALP town halls, but one of the things that I've shared with my students is how much we're participating in all of the NALP town halls, and that we are actively, regularly gauging what's happening in the broader legal community. And, I hope my students are being honest with me and saying, oh, that's really great. That's so helpful that exists. And I think at the very least, they know that we are gathering every piece of data we possibly can, and that we're advising them based upon the most current data we have.
I agree, Elizabeth. I do the same thing. I say, I've had this many conversations with employers and my colleagues at different schools, and this is what they're saying. This is what we're hearing. That's why it's important for us to have events like this, so we can, with accuracy, say we're surveying the market in a way that, many people, including our colleagues in the building, right, faculty and whoever else, don't know the extent of what we do when we do things like this, right? Other types of jobs don't necessarily do the things that we do to get information from each other. So I agree with you. I do that all the time. I let them know I talk to employers, I talk to recruiters, I talk, and so I think, and that's what I mean by transparency. It's look, we don't have the answers, but we're doing everything we can to get them.
Arturo, we have about 3 minutes left. Did you want to wrap things
Sure.
up for us?
So everyone, thank you so much for participating. I will reach out with the date when we can all get back together on a shared Zoom meeting, and we'll host that at our end. I'm looking at Lance's lovely black and white picture up on the screen there, and knowing that Lance will assist me in making that come true. There's a thumbs up from Lance. And we didn't get actually to the diversity question, which I think is a pressing and a critical question. I do want to leave with one thought on that. I'm involved in our diversity committee, and I'm Latinx, so it's a huge issue for me. It has to be hyper deliberate this year, like more so than in any other year. And it's always never deliberate enough, right? But now it has to be. There was I've seen 2 studies that have been brought to me directly or indirectly through faculty. One is that women, their academic production went down precipitously at law schools during the last recession. And then there was just a separate study, not related to that, but about how few women and diverse candidates seek directed study opportunities with faculty. And I think those are, the first one is a telling point. The second one is something we could do about by deliberately putting our students, all of them, but certainly our students of color, our female students, with professors to do directed research, right? And that doesn't actually cost money. Hopefully they get paid even, but even if they can't, like that connection and that experience, I think is huge. And other than that, I'm out of time. So someone else needs the room. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone,
Look
for
forward
coming.
to seeing you
Y'all
again
were
soon.
amazing.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks for
Bye.
sharing.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.